The shadows grew longer as the 10th Legion made camp for the night by the Rhine. Marcus Terentius Verus, centurion of the first cohort, removed his helmet and ran a hand through his close-cropped hair. On his bronze cuirass, 9 phalae, awards for 20 years of service, glistened faintly in the fading light. The sunset painted the sky crimson, much like that day 18 years earlier when a fresh-faced boy from Capua first stood among the recruits. Now, after hundreds of battles, he could name every inch of his sword and every dent in his shield with his eyes closed. But it had all begun very differently. In the spring of 62 BC, the Roman recruiter Lucius Fabius arrived in Marcus's mountain village. "The empire needs strong men," he bellowed in the square. 25 years of service, and you'll earn land and citizenship for your children." Young Marcus, then just a peasant's son, couldn't imagine that in 3 years he'd be bracing against Gallic charges, in 10 years leading assaults on British fortifications, or that in 20 he'd become part of what men called the backbone of Rome. The dusty road from Capua to Rome had seemed endless that first day. His mother's flatbread and a bronze amulet of Mars were all he carried. Ahead lay 25 years of the unknown. The recruit camp assaulted his senses, the stench of sweat, the bark of centurions, the metallic taste of fear. Physicians poked and prodded, checking teeth and eyesight before the real test began. 3 miles in full gear. "What, you pig? Wallowing in the mud?" The centurion's roar still echoed in his memory when he'd collapsed just short of the finish. His punishment, a week cleaning latrines, had been merciful compared to what came next. The oath before Mars's shrine still chilled him. "By Jupiter, I swear to obey without question and never flee the battlefield." His voice had trembled then, knowing the penalty for breaking this vow was death. That first night in barracks, 8 men to a room, hard bunks, the sounds of a Sicilian boy quietly weeping. Marcus had stared at the ceiling, realizing this cold barracks, this heavy shield, this iron discipline would be his life now. Dawn came brutally early, the horn's blast slicing through sleep. "On your feet, maggots!" Those slow to rise earned extra laps in full gear. Breakfast was meager, coarse bread, olives, the vinegary posca, as an old veteran's scarred face leaned close. "Remember, boy, the army feeds fighters. Can't fight, you'll starve." This was more than Marcus's story. It was the story of every man who'd ever shouldered the legionary shield, of blood and sweat and iron, of those who built the roads Europe still walks today. The shadows by the Rhine deepened as the centurion's calloused fingers traced the notches on his sword, each one a memory, a battle, a life given to Rome. The first day of training began with formation. "I am Centurion Lucius Flavius," the commander introduced himself. "In 1 year I will make soldiers of you, or corpses." The wooden sword in Marcus's hand felt impossibly heavy. The wicker training shield weighed like stone. Ahead lay hours of striking posts, forced marches, and endless drills. By evening, Marcus's hands were raw with bloody blisters. His back burned, his legs threatened to give way. When he finally collapsed to his knees, the centurion loomed over him. "Did you think this would be easy?" he hissed. "Rome has no mercy for weakness. On your feet." Marcus stood, and in that moment he understood. There was no turning back now. He was a legionary, or a corpse. 3 months later, Marcus barely recognized himself in the polished bronze of his shield, which now served as his mirror. Rough hands, a weathered face, cropped hair. Nothing remained of the farm boy who had once been afraid to even swing a sword. Training had become routine. Dawn wake-ups, 10-mile runs in full gear, exhausting drills. But the worst awaited them on the fields of death, the recruits' name for sparring matches. "Today you fight for real," the centurion announced one morning. Marcus was paired against Cassius, a hulking Italian. Wooden swords, unpadded shields, no mercy. The first strike cracked against Marcus's ribs. He gritted his teeth but held his ground. The second slammed his shoulder. The third buckled his knee. Blood blurred his vision, but he remembered the rule. A legionary never falls. Summoning his last strength, Marcus lunged. His shield smashed into Cassius's face. The wooden sword drove into his gut. His opponent crumpled to the sand. "Not bad," the centurion muttered. "But in real battle you'll face steel, and mistakes cost lives." That evening in the infirmary, Marcus and Cassius sat side by side, dousing wounds with vinegar. "Back to formation tomorrow?" Cassius asked. Marcus nodded. Back to formation. Day after day, blow after blow, until the wooden sword became an extension of his arm, until pain turned familiar, until fear was left far behind. The year 60 BCE burned hotter than most. When the 10th Legion marched north to crush the Allobroges' rebellion, grit crunched between teeth even in camp. Marcus, now fully trained, donned real battle armor for the first time. The Lorica segmentata's weight felt unexpectedly natural, like a second skin polished to a gleam. But when he gripped his gladius, his fingers trembled. This short blade, barely 2 handspans long, would soon taste real blood. The Alpine crossing took 17 days. 8-hour marches under 30 kilograms of gear. Each evening, fortifications, trenches, palisades, towers. A legionary sleeps only behind walls. That lesson had been hammered into them from day one. On the 18th morning, sentries spotted smoke on the horizon. "To arms!" The command rolled through the ranks. Hundreds of shields snapped into position. Marcus took his place in the third line, as drilled. His cohort formed triple ranks, Hastati in front, Principes behind, veteran Triarii at the rear. When the Allobroges poured from the forest, half-naked, faces painted with blue swirls, the ground shook under their war cries. The first order came sharp. "Pilum Ies," 200 heavy javelins arced skyward. Marcus watched his pilum punch through a barbarian's shield, pinning the wooden planks to the man's arm. A second volley, and the enemy's front ranks disintegrated. Gladios stringite. Swords whispered from scabbards in a single silver sigh. At 10 paces, the command Marcus both feared and awaited rang out. Cunnem formate. The cohort became a living battering ram. The clash stunned Marcus. A berserker with an axe crashed against his shield, spraying warm spittle into his face, the stench of garlic, sweat, and iron. An instinctive thrust. Hot liquid gushed over his hand. A second opponent, a stab to the gut. A third, a slash to the thigh. Blood painted slick patterns in the sand. When the battle ended, Marcus leaned on his sword, gasping. His cloak was soaked, others' blood and his own. Before him lay a dead Allobrogian boy, no older than himself. The corpse's eyes accused the heavens. "Look away, recruit," a passing veteran rasped. "Today you killed your first enemy. Tomorrow you'll bury friends." The first winter on foreign soil proved a trial worse than battle. When the legion settled into winter quarters in Narbonese Gaul, snowdrifts rose waist-high. The barracks offered little respite from the cold. Icy winds seeped through the shields covering window gaps, and the lone brazier, guarded in shifts, became a sacred relic of warmth. It was then Marcus truly understood Roman discipline. Morning inspections of gear, weekly formation drills, monthly weapon audits. A rusty sword is treason, the centurion would say. No mere metaphor. He once flogged 2 legionaries whose armor showed specks of neglect, but the true nightmare was night watch. 4 hours on the ramparts, cold gnawing through wool cloaks and leather sandals. Feet numbed, fingers froze to javelin shafts. Once Marcus found he could pluck frost from his eyelashes, just as he'd done as a boy in the Apennines. Rations dwindled daily, grain porridge with jerky dubbed Cerberus's rations. Wine froze in skins, crumbling into icy shards. Only posca, vinegar water, remained unchanged, its acidity a perverse comfort. That winter Marcus learned La Tronquelie, carving soldiers' checkers from deer antlers. Evenings huddled around the brazier. They diced and spoke of home. Veteran Lucius taught them to weave rawhide sandals, a skill that later saved many a march. The true scourge came with the marsh fevers. 1/10 of the legion perished in a month. Marcus watched strong men reduced to shuddering wrecks by the fever's teeth. Medics offered only leeches and garlic poultices. When spring brought replacements, the legion stood thinner. But survivors were tempered, gazes sharper, movements precise, humor darker. "Congratulations," the centurion barked at inspection. "You're no longer recruits. You're Rome's legionaries now." 3 years of service had reshaped Marcus. His shoulders broadened, his gaze honed to a blade's edge. A Gallic axe scar marked his right arm. The day Centurion Flavius first called him soldier instead of recruit, the legion assembled unusually. No drills, just ranks stiff on the parade ground. The consul paced the lines, pausing before Marcus. Time seemed to still. "This man," he declared, "saved our cohort's standard last month. For this he earns double pay and the rank of Decanus." The crowd roared. Decanus, leader of 8 men, the first rung up the ladder. Marcus flushed as they fixed a red horsehair plume to his helmet. Joy was short-lived. That evening, veteran Lucius, now his subordinate, approached. "Congratulations, Commander," he smirked. "Now our lives are in your hands. Best not falter." His eyes added, "Prove yourself." Their first mission tested them immediately, escorting a supply train through lands where Germanic scouts had been spotted days prior. "Rule 1, Marcus muttered, recalling the centurion's lessons. "Never lower your guard." He divided his contubernium into watches, scouted every hollow himself. On the 3rd day, Lucius, ever the skeptic, gave a silent nod. When they returned unscathed, even Flavius grunted, "Not bad for a novice." That night Marcus joined the junior officer's fire, here sipping real wine, not posca. He heard tales withheld from recruits, of betrayals and heroism, bribes and sacrifice. "Remember," an old Optio told him, "leadership means carrying others' lives. Today, 8 men, tomorrow, 80, soon perhaps a cohort." Marcus stared into the flames. In his pocket lay a bronze tablet engraved with 8 names, his first taste of authority and his first crushing weight of duty. Smoke from burning fields veiled the horizon as the 10th Legion approached Alesia. On the hilltop, encircled by double fortifications, Vercingetorix waited with 60,000 Gauls. Caesar ordered siege works built, and for the first time, Marcus found himself waging an engineer's war. "Dig!" the centurions roared. 20 feet deep, no less. Marcus, now commanding 16 men, took up a spade himself. They worked day and night, torchlight flickering over blistered hands. By week's end, a wooden and earth city encircled Alesia. Double walls studded with towers, hidden stimuli, sharpened stakes in pits, water-filled trenches. Gallic sorties came like waves, each repelled by Roman discipline. On the 20th day, Marcus was given command of the night watch along a wall segment. Clouds swallowed the moon when sentries spotted movement beyond the outer defenses. "They're coming," Lucius whispered. Tens of thousands of Gauls, summoned by Vercingetorix to break the siege, attacked from outside while the garrison struck from within. Panic rippled through the ranks. Men abandoned posts, fleeing toward the camp's center. "Hold!" Marcus bellowed over the chaos. "If they breach here, we all die!" His men froze. 3 hours of hell. Stones, arrows, boiling pitch. A rock shattered Marcus's shoulder, but he kept shouting orders. When Gauls scaled his section, he unleashed their last reserve, a cauldron of searing oil. The attackers fell back, screaming. At dawn, word came. Caesar had led a counterattack and crushed the relief force. Alesia would fall within days. "You held the line," Centurion Flavius said, surveying the bloodied fortifications. 3 of Marcus's 16 men lay dead. Later, watching Vercingetorix throw his arms at Caesar's feet, Marcus knew he'd become part of history. But as the Gallic chieftain was led away in chains, he felt no triumph, only exhaustion and the weight of loss. Victory proved heavier than Marcus imagined. After Alesia, the 10th Legion marched to Rome for Caesar's triumph. Crowds roared as they entered through the Ostian gate, showering them with flowers. Yet behind the pomp festered bitter truths. Marcus marched in the 4th rank, shoulders straining under Gallic silver. His feet kept perfect time, but his mind wandered to the fallen. Young Tiberius, arrow struck at Alesia's walls. Old Lucius, claimed by fever on the road home. The triumph lasted 4 days. On the Forum, legionaries received medals. Marcus was given a bronze phalera depicting Mars. But when he tried to sell it, the moneylender smirked. "Another hero? You're the 20th today." That evening, in a Subura tavern, Marcus saw Victory's true face. 2 wounded comrades begged outside Vesta's temple. A third, who'd lost a leg, drank himself into oblivion in the corner. "We gave Rome Gaul," a former Optio rasped, shaking an empty purse. "What did we get?" Even double pay had vanished in the city's jaws. Next morning, Marcus watched slaves herd Gallic prisoners to auction. Among them, a young warrior he'd captured at Alesia recognized him, and spat. "Don't fret," Flavius clapped his shoulder, voice sour with 25 years' service. "In a year they'll offer you land in some backwater. You'll teach barbarians to plow and pay taxes." As the celebrations ended, new orders came. March to Spain. Marcus watched sunset bleed over the Capitoline marble and wondered for the first time, what awaits me when these 25 years end? The 10th year of service began for Marcus in an unexpected place, a hospital bed. A wound from the assault on a Spanish fortress had festered, and the physicians feared for his life. It was here, in that stifling room reeking of vinegar and blood, that he met the man who would change his view of service forever. An old veteran named Gaius Cassius, who'd lost an eye in Germania, lay on the cot beside him. His term had ended 5 years prior, but he'd stayed on temporarily. Now gangrene was eating him alive, and there was no one left to even write to his family. "Listen, boy," Cassius rasped, gripping Marcus's hand. "I gave the army 30 years, thought I'd get land, a family, and for what?" He waved at the empty ward. "The army devours us like Saturn devouring his children." 3 days later, Cassius was gone, buried in a mass grave behind the camp, his meager belongings auctioned off. Marcus bought his medals, the only remnants of 25 years of service. The incident haunted Marcus. He began saving money, defying the Legion's tradition of squandering pay on wine and women. At night, he learned arithmetic and writing from the camp scribe. What? Planning to join the Senate? His comrades jeered. But Marcus stayed silent. He'd seen veterans given land in distant provinces, only to be swallowed by local moneylenders, heroes reduced to beggars, clutching bowls outside temples. When Centurion Flavius offered him the rank of Optio, Marcus accepted after long deliberation. More responsibility, but also a better chance to survive. To return home one day not just as a veteran, but as a man of standing. One night while inspecting the watch, Marcus overheard two young legionaries dreaming of future glory. He nearly told them about Gaius Cassius, but stopped. Let them believe in their invincibility a while longer. The truth would come for them, as it came for all. The 23rd year of service. Marcus Terentius Verus, now Primus Optio of the 10th Legion, stood on the bank of an unfamiliar river deep in Germanic lands. Ahead loomed the dense, unwelcoming forest the locals called Teutoburg. Behind him stretched 3 legions, snaking for miles along a narrow trail. "I hate these damned woods," muttered Centurion Flavius, adjusting his helmet. His once red hair had gone gray, but his eyes still burned cold. Marcus merely nodded. After Gaul, Spain, and Africa, this gloomy Germania felt especially hostile. 3 days of ceaseless rain had turned the path to sludge. Wagons sank to their axles. Legionaries waded knee-deep in muck, gripping their shields tighter. Curses rippled down the column. Their Germanic guides, provided by the chieftain Arminius, led them down increasingly obscure trails. On the 3rd day, Marcus was the first to sense danger. The forest had gone too quiet. No birds, no rustling. When he warned Flavius, the centurion grimaced. "I sent a messenger to Varus, but he trusts his friend Arminius more than his own veterans." Disaster struck at dusk. First came the arrows, raining into the column's head. Then dozens of half-naked warriors, bodies painted blue, erupted from the undergrowth. Worst of all, the allied Germanic auxiliaries turned on them from behind. "Testudo! Testudo!" Marcus roared. But in the thick woods the formation shattered. Trees blocked their shields. Branches tore helmets away. Blood mingled with rain, forming pink puddles. When Flavius fell, an axe buried in his back, Marcus took command. With a handful of survivors, he fought his way to a hillock, trying to rally a defense. But the noose tightened. The last thing he saw before a club struck his skull was the 10th Legion's eagle toppling into the mud. He woke in darkness, pinned under corpses. Pain pulsed in his temple to the rhythm of rain lashing dead faces. Distant Germanic victory cries and Roman prisoners' sobs echoed. Groping for his gladius, Marcus crawled away. He didn't yet know he'd become one of the few survivors of Rome's greatest military disaster, the Battle of Teutoburg Forest. For 2 months he staggered toward the Rhine, surviving on roots and raw meat. When Roman sentries finally found him, emaciated, scabbed, barely human, his first question was, "How many lived?" The sentry looked away. "They say fewer than 100 from 3 legions." No one spoke aloud of the Teutoburg disaster. Emperor Augustus, they said, had beaten his head against a doorframe, howling, "Quintilius Verus, give me back my legions." But for Marcus, the war was over. His 25 years of service had reached their end. The veteran's land he'd been promised lay in northern Italy, a modest plot with a hut and olive trees. For months, he woke at night to screams only he could hear, his hand groping for a sword that wasn't there. He married a local merchant's daughter, a woman no longer young, her own scars from war still fresh. Her first husband had died in Parthia. Their children were strong, a boy and a girl. Marcus taught his son to wield a gladius, though he knew the boy would never wear lorica segmentata. News from the capital sometimes reached him. The 10th Legion, reforged, now fought in Judea. Centurion Flavius and the others had been posthumously honored, and somewhere in the Germanic woods 3 eagles still rusted. When Marcus's grandson turned 5, the old veteran told him of Teutoburg Forest for the first time. The boy listened wide-eyed, then asked, "Grandfather, did you win?" Marcus gazed at the olive trees he'd planted, the smoke curling from his daughter's hut. "No," he said at last, "but I survived, and that too is victory." That evening, by the hearth, he drew his gladius for the first time in years. The blade, polished by time, still gleamed sharp. Tomorrow he'd give it to his son, a relic to remember by. But tonight he watched the firelight dance on steel, and in its flicker he saw the shadows of all he'd ever known. The last legionary of the 10th dozed in his chair, and in his dream he was 18 again. Standing in line with the recruits, Centurion Flavius barking "Forward march," and Marcus marched through years, through battles, through the life that had begun long ago on a dusty road to Rome. The story of Marcus Terentius Varus is fiction, but thousands like him were real. These were the men who built the roads we still walk, who died in forgotten skirmishes and triumphed in legendary battles. They were the backbone of an empire now dust, yet etched into the bones of Europe. Today, when you trace the ruins of a Roman fort or taste the word legionary on your tongue, remember Marcus and those like him. They've earned that much.